as I've said many times, the universe, as far as we know, is 14 or so billion years old according to current theories. It may, in fact, be timeless if there's a larger metaverse or megaverse or omniverse or multiverse or whatever you want to call it. But in all of that, the only thing that interests you is yourself and your own puny perceptions. I'm not saying everyone has to write, Isaac Asimov like space operas or whatnot, but sometimes I think, if I see a little bug crawling along, what is that bug thinking, looking up at me? If there was a bug crawling across my screen as I'm speaking to you, does that, you and I are conversing because we have powers of observation and intellect that these little sounds we make, we can interpret and we can get cognitive things from. But a little bug, a millipede or something crawling across my screen would just hear sound. It would be unintelligible to it. Even the whole world that we live in would be unintelligible. As imagine if there really were ghosts, for example. They might have, they might look at us and say, boy, those stupid living people, they don't understand what the cosmos is really like. And so you have to think of these things and approach things with these different ideas, because they're interesting. They give credence to the idea that there are things beyond just the self. And too many people nowadays, and politically I understand why identity politics exists, but that can't be an excuse for limiting yourself to just yourself. If, for example, I was yesterday sketching out the next 8 or 9 plays of mine. One of the plays I'm going to do is about when the Vikings came to North America and met some native tribes. And I was looking up which native tribes would play, and there's a tribe in the Gulf of St. Lawrence area called the Mi'kmaq. And I said, let me do the play from their perspective, where the Vikings are the outsiders, and the Vikings, they can't understand what the Vikings are saying. And now someone would say, well, that's cultural appropriation. How can you write from a Native American perspective? Or since they're in Canada, they'd be called First Nations. Easy. I've got an imagination. If there's no greater stretch of imagination for me to write from a Native American perspective 1,000 years ago when the Vikings were in North America than it is for me in a later science fiction novel set 1,500 years from now. Why can I write about aliens that live 1,500 years from now when mankind gets out into the stars, but it's verboten for me to write about Native Americans 1,000 years ago? That's silly. I wrote a play about mound builders too, which is set 1,500 years ago. There is nothing as a human being that can experience that I can't empathize with. I'm never going to know, for example, because I'm a male, what vaginal yeast infections are like. But that doesn't mean that because I can't actually feel what a vaginal yeast infection is like, I don't know what some kind of infection or what some kind of problem physically is going to be there. And people delimit their universes for many reasons. A lot of it now is political correctness, and I understand the impulse to it. I think it's a good thing to want to try to know about Native Americans 1,000 years ago, or about black lesbians in today, or about whatever it might be. But you can't tell an artist that they can't write about this. I have more in common, and I'm going to know more about, for example, the human side of those Native Americans 1,000 years ago than a Native American who isn't creative will. Yes, they may know the particular ceremonies that their people did 1,000 years ago, but they're not going to understand what it's like to be human and get inside that human 1,000 years dead, whether it's an ancient Chinese, whether it's an ancient Native American, whether it's a Roman, whether it's an African, whether it's a Patagonian, or whether it's a Maori person from New Zealand. That is the thing that an artist can do. And when you tell an artist they can't do that, what you are doing is you are screwing future generations. Because if a great artist comes up with, let's say some young kid like you contacts me, and they could be a great poet, and they want to write a great poetry sequence about, this, that, or the other thing. Who the fuck am I or you or anyone to tell them they can't do that? Yes, if they do it poorly, criticize them. But don't criticize them for the desire to do that. the desire to get in other people's shoes is a good thing. It's called empathy. That's the thing that should be encouraged by people who are so-called politically correct. Not to say that, oh, you can't do that.